So we got Olya Sonica with
That's
us
right.
today. First she was Olya, and now she's Olya Sonica. She used to be in a band, and now she's solo, hence the name change. And she's got a new album, Alchemy, out in April of 2024.
That's right.
Welcome, Olya.
Thank you
Welcome
so much.
back.
Thank
Welcome
you,
back
Jake.
to Music Existence. Thank you for being
Woohoo! Thank you for having me. It's just interesting because I mean I love the name Music Existence, but it's kind of has like no pun intended, right? Welcome back into Music
here.
Existence.
Yeah, we're all here, we're all present, we all exist for the sake of music. So I guess one thing I want to get on the table is back when I interviewed you, let me just check my notes. That
Yeah,
was
for sure.
August 19th of 2016.
Wow, that's
You
amazing.
so you were in a band called Scarlet Sails, and I just want to know from being in that band to now going solo, what transpired?
Oh, it's a whole story, Jake. But yeah, Scarlet Sales was a fun run. It was my first band actually to kind of like actively be playing in. And then in 2019, basically, I moved from New York to LA with my ex-partner, who was my drummer as well, Brian Viglione, and things weren't going that great. So we separated, and shortly after the pandemic started. So I basically moved out, and I was kind of couch surfing, staying with my friends, and it was a new city. I kind of was like, when I moved from Moscow to New York City with a backpack, it was kind of a similar situation in a way because it was again a new city, and like everything I knew kind of like fell apart. Because I mean, there are good things about being in a relationship with someone that you're in a band with and making business with, but also because it's fun to do all of it together. But then the downfall of that is that if the relationship ends, everything ends.
Yeah,
So
it's because like all you have is tied to that band and tied to those feelings and tied to everything. So it,
yeah,
you know,
yeah. So basically, yes. So that was done. That was over. And then I was trying to like, and I was in a new city again. And I left, and was kind of like had bare minimum. My keyboard, my guitar, was kind of like staying at my friend's house and trying to think about what I want to do next. And it was the rebirth. And weirdly enough, like from that personal crisis, like 4 months later, we went into the pandemic. So I kind of
yeah.
experienced it personally. And then the whole world went into that reboot and like kind of crazy situation where you don't know what's next. You kind of in this like limbo and you can do nothing about it in a way. So yeah, that was, and I also was kind of involved in a couple of other music projects that also ended, but because of the pandemic, obviously we stopped playing and then being in different places, it just didn't work out. And of course, is like in every good story, there's a blessing in disguise, right? So
Yeah.
like while like I'm losing everything I had, and I identified myself with going into this pandemic, being in this thing where like I cannot go actively, go out and play live or do stuff like that, or get involved in other projects. I had to sit with myself. And that's when I started basically working on my solo record before even knowing that I was working on my solo record because I
Oh
was
man.
writing so much.
So the pandemic kind of fueled your solo material in that sense. Now, going back a little bit to like when you transitioned from, you know, being in New York, because that's where you were when I interviewed you, and
Yeah.
then you moved to LA. Um, did a lot of those kind of anxieties of being in a new city return in some way, or were you now equipped with the skills that you picked up in New York and that you were able to adapt to LA at that point?
That's a great question, Jake. Honestly, um, so definitely I had I had a skill set. I feel like I can do a masterclass about how to survive in a new city and how to adapt to new things. But with that being said, it was easier than the first time, and obviously it wasn't like not like it was not that much of a culture shock comparing when you move from Moscow to New York. Like New York to LA is like a little easier on your psyche, I think. But in the same time, New York and LA have such different mentalities and such different. It just has such. It's a different like microcosmos, you know, like it's a different thing. So I definitely was more equipped and it was easier on me in many ways, but also it was very new and different and had me again kind of rediscover myself, which is again, it's that's kind of I'm like jumping, I'm going ahead, like forward with Alchemy. The record is basically to me the alchemizing. It's like turning your weakness into power.
Mm-hmm.
So, that same like, theme with like blessing in disguise or whatever, what is here in this difficult situation that like what is happening for me in this instead of like what is happening to me, taking that approach.
Yeah. So like as far as like channeling all of those emotions, like even though it was great to have broken free and started fresh, and you said like, hey, I'm by myself now, like did a lot of that, was it like kind of cathartic to kind of write all that while going through that pain? Because I'd imagine it's so much on you, especially that whole process.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I didn't even realize how difficult that whole process was. And especially, when you're I don't know, when you feel things deeply as an artist. It's music is as always is, what saves me and what keeps me going, and definitely a cathartic thing for me. Like it's this, and writing music or going to see my favorite band, it's kind of the same feeling I get from it, and that's why I became a musical artist because I just that's the single thing that brings me the most joy and this cathartic feeling in my heart.
I think it's good to have that level of respect for yourself, because when you're tied so heavily in a relationship of any kind, and especially when you're invested, and especially when that guy says like either you're nothing without me or you're never gonna survive on your own, sometimes it gets to you, and sometimes you have this history of choking where you forget like how to write a song, or you forget like how to sing or
100%.
anything like that.
100%, absolutely. I have gone through that, and it's one of my like new songs that I recently released is called "Doing It Without You," and it
Doing it
came from them.
without you, then.
Yeah, it came from that place. I was talking to my friend and telling her like about things about my previous relationship and how I felt at times like powerless, or if I didn't feel confident enough in myself, or because I, was told these things that I couldn't do it on my own and all that stuff. And she was like, "You should write a song about that." And I was like, "Okay." And then I went on a hike the next day, and I just went. There's this beautiful place in the middle of Hollywood that not that many people go to. I don't know why. It's called Hollywood Reservoir. It's a big lake. So I went there, and just literally while I was hiking, the song came as a download to me. And I had two voice memos of it. And like one, like the first one, the second one had the whole song in there with like 90% of the lyrics in it, which was kind of like amazing. So yeah, to answer your question, it takes it's constantly you bump into this thing of like, oh, I can't do it because that's what I've heard. This is what like, now um like the voices in my head are telling me that because I've heard it so much. And then you go, no, but let me try. And you
Mhm.
try it and try it and try it. And every time at a certain point you go like, nope, not gonna listen to this. I'm just gonna do my own thing. So you kind of just have to do it. It's like practice.
Yeah, growing pains all over again, but nonetheless, get through them.
Yeah.
And uh, and speaking of doing it without you, I really like the cover art too. It's very tongue in cheek with the wedding cake with
Yeah.
the the bride is all yay, and then the groom is like upside down in the cake.
Yes, we had this amazing artist. She does drawings and also does cakes. Michelle, she was we found this inspiration on like Pinterest or whatever, and she was the one who made the cake. And yeah, it was part of our music video actually. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but like I'm cutting the cake in that it's like a divorce party, and I'm cutting the cake in that video.
It's like an anti wedding. It's very
Well,
punk rock,
yeah, I mean, I
very
think
punk.
that yeah, punk rock attitude was always with me. I mean, spending so much time in New York, Lower East Side, and like in
Yeah,
that.
with the New York punks.
That's right.
Know what I'm saying? Know what I'm saying? But that it's so it's so cool. Like and I like the direction that you're um going to now. It's like when I listened to Scarlet Sails, it was kind of hidden behind all this intricate like instrumentation. And it's not to take anything away from that, because I'm sure that regardless, the relationships that you built, you know, just from the people involved with that project were important to you. But now it's like with your solo stuff, it's so much more bare bones, and it's so
Yeah.
much more kind of authentic in a way. You're not as shielded by like all this other stuff.
You know, it's interesting you're saying that. I love your questions and your observations because I mean a lot of that the arrangements were coming from my ex partner,
Yeah.
and and I was just living in that realm that he kind of like built around me in a way, which is like an interesting
Just
thing.
all do the rest. You just didn't look good and sing
Yeah,
prettily and all
yeah. And now it's just like what I'm
now
doing.
you're your own hero, pretty
Yeah,
much.
pretty much. And I think everyone should be, honestly. Nobody should be playing in someone else's story. But
Yeah,
that's a whole
yeah.
other thing. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's all about to me, it's like, I'm speaking from my heart. I have a little bit of like punk rock attitude. I have just like a lot of energy and a lot of just I want to connect with the world through music, like because I was able to connect with the world through music. I want to just continue that same thing. So yeah.
And you've grown a lot. You know, you've said that back when you were in Russia, you were a homebody, just like immersed in books. And so
Yeah.
you've had to learn your way around and
100%.
learn who to trust, learn who's worth like keeping around, but also you've like recognized that regardless of any bad shit that happens, like there is good in the world. The world isn't as bad as you make it out to be.
No, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. The thing it's interesting because a lot of people tell me like, oh, you're so outgoing, you're so like this and that, like it's
Nah.
easy for you. I was like, I wasn't coming from that place, like seriously. I was like a bookworm, like you were saying. I was just like very much like in my own little world, and then I opened up to it. It's also like it's kind of like reimagining yourself, and with that, but because I think I, kind of like read so many books and so many stories, I was able to kind of navigate my own story. And now, to me, it's like I strongly believe at this point of my life that like good energy attracts good energy, and sometimes good energy also attracts like it's like the moth like flying to the light, but you
Yeah.
kind of have to like if you have to keep your heart relaxed and vulnerable, but also protected. And
Hmm.
so, you through navigating all of that for a while, you like recognize where to kind of just say, okay, I'm good, and go some other way, and where to, you feel the good energy around you, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna invest more of myself in it,
On a
type of
more
thing.
positive note,
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about in general the Alchemy album, the alchemy of alchemy, as it were. I mean, I know your influences, you've told me way back when, were very diverse. I know that's a very cliche word at this point, but you're very much into Queen. You loved Alicia Keys back then, and you also loved a couple of Russian bands. I remember Night Snipers and
That's correct.
Zemfira.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I was wondering, like in general, what were you listening to kind of fuel the inspiration for the solo stuff?
It's interesting because I still absolutely love Queen and Alicia Keys and those not Russian bands as well. Um, and I think it's part of me that I was that kind of in that setting of Scarlet Sales was the most responsive to what the vision of Scarlet Sales was according to Brian and all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
But like when I started reconnecting with myself, I was like, oh man, like what really was like really like it was getting me going. And at the same time, and it was 2000, I think 21, the documentary came out about Nebworth, the Oasis playing Nebworth. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
No, but
And
I will be interested in checking it out.
it's so good. Basically, I was like, man, I remember that I really loved, Oasis and all stuff. And I went to the movie theater with my friend who's also a music lover, and we just like were had goosebumps the whole time of the movie, and we sang every song. And I was in the car. We put some more Oasis songs. We were listening to it, and then I came home, and I that's how I wrote like the first single of my record, High on Life. Like literally in 2 minutes again, I was like, this is what gets me high on life. This like big, I think what I love the most about music is like that sense of camaraderie when everyone is singing the song together and having the feelings and like just pouring their hearts out and this big crowd of people. And that's where like I think Oasis, they're really great at that because everyone knows like I don't know, Wonderwall or Don't Look Back in Anger, like songs like that. You can sing them at a bar, you can sing them in a car. Like it's something that it's like something that Beatles had. Those songs that it's just like a sing along thing. So I kind of started reconnecting with my like Britpop uh, favorite bands,
Yeah,
and
sensibilities. Yeah.
yeah, so I kind of went down that road, and I saw so many shows in the past couple of years, which was incredible. I flew to see Liam Gallagher do Nebworth gig last year, which was amazing and kind of life changing.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, yeah, because it's like literally like 26 years later, and everyone was just. I don't know how it was 26 later because I wasn't in the crowd, but I saw the documentary. But the
Right.
feeling of it was just insane. The whole day we were just kind of like flying off the handles and just, you know, it was
I think
amazing.
part of that, part of what makes that so special is because you were with, other people who share that same passion,
Absolutely.
alone. And it goes back to like what we were saying, but kind of in a different context. Alone, you can only do so much, but when you have the connections that you've built and fostered, especially with the team that you have, like it it like resonates with you so much more. And I was wondering like as an extension of that, what can you say about the team of people that you have now?
I mean, honestly, I feel so, I don't know if the word blessed or just lucky to have all these amazing people around me. And I feel like it's interesting because as soon as I decided in my heart I was going to work on my solo thing, I started having this like people just coming into my life and supporting me on my way to doing it. Because like when I recorded the first couple of songs, I didn't think much about it. I just flew to New York. I had a couple of people. The Kevin Jones, he used to play in Scarlet Tales with me as well. So I
Oh,
brought
cool.
him back as my bassist, and then I had a couple of other musicians joining in the studio, and Ben Rice, also a producer that I met during the Scarlet Sales time. Um, I told him what I wanted to do, and he was like, "Hell yeah, let's do it!" And so we got in a room, recorded like 3 songs. I flew back to LA, and I was like, "Okay, well, we recorded a couple of songs," and I was,
Yeah.
doing other things. And then people were like, "Oh, so what did you do?" And I would, you know, uh, play the songs for them, and they would be like, "What the actual
Yeah,
fuck, like you're doing.
yeah,
Like they're
yeah,
like,
yeah.
this is amazing. And I was like, what? They're
Like,
like,
what,
yeah, like this is
really?
great. Blah, blah.
Something
Like,
like
yeah, yeah. And so like, and they're like, can we do anything? Can we like help you, like whatever? And I was like, sure, yeah, okay. And so then, so like people started kind of like, facilitating certain things for me. And then I flew back to New York and I came and recorded three more songs. And I was like, I'm going to have an EP ready basically to release and whatever. And then I came back to LA and I was at the Sunset Marquis Hotel. I was actually bartending at the time. And this guy walked in, sat at the bar. We talked for a while. I didn't know who he was. And like, long story short, we like really like we're talking about music and all that stuff. He's like, if you like, make your music as well as you make your cocktail, it's like I want to hear it. And I was like, okay. And then he was like, I have this burner phone. Um, like, I was like,
oh
I'll send it
boy.
to you. He was like, I have a burner phone, so you cannot send it to me, but we can go listen to it. And so downstairs of the Sunset Marquis Hotel, there's this music studio called Nightbird, and I'm really good friends with the manager and the owner. And I called the manager and I go, can we go downstairs in the studio? And he's like, yeah, of course. So and ends up at Sturgill Simpson. I don't know if you're familiar with who he is. He's like big in the country world, but I didn't know because I
Yeah.
didn't, with country music wasn't kind of part of my periphery. It's more now. And so he listened to the song and he like turned around to me. He goes like, again. He listened to it again. And he's like, what are you doing? I was like, what? He's like, this is the best thing I heard in rock in 20 years. He's like, what's going on? Like, what are you doing with this? I'm like, I was
You're
thinking about
going back
making
to basics.
yeah. He's like, I was thinking about making an EP. And he's like, you have to have an album. And I was like, okay. And so it's like one thing
Go
kept
for
building after
it.
another. Yeah. And then I had like I was quitting bartending and I had my going away party. And again, like a bunch of people came out from like
Yeah.
LA music scene and whatever. And they asked me to play a couple songs and everyone's like, oh, this is amazing. And so then two people that I already knew from before, previously, Betsy Martinez and Cynthia, they were like, can we get involved? What can we do? Like we want to get behind this. And so they basically we had a meeting the next day. We talked for 4 hours and our values and inspirations and aspirations, everything was like aligning so well. And they're like, we'll start a record label to represent you. And so that's kind of like was insane because they started a record label, Fangirl Records, and then um, they flew me back to New York so I could finish the album. And the team is this is how the team keeps on building from these people who genuinely have this like just you know kind of like this reaction this like to the music and which is I'm like it's mind blowing to me and it's the most beautiful thing that could ever happen so
Yeah.
yeah yeah
And that's so cool that it happens so organically like that. The most important thing, and like who's worth staying kind of in your circle is when
yeah
word travels in a non-gossipy way. When word travels in terms of like support and like people are like are not like, yeah, oh, you just showed me something, but I'm not really sure about it, whatever. But these people were curious motherfuckers. They were just like, man, look at what Olya is doing. But also, like, to an added emphasis, they knew in their hearts that it was good stuff, that you should continue with
yeah
it. So that really, I mean, I can tell like that you're grateful because like
yes very
you
much
never
so
knew like how it would turn out. Like if they would just
exactly
love you, but only to a certain point, and then it was like, well,
hmm hmm
you know,
yeah yeah absolutely. Yeah, yeah when when you're kind of like being in this like kind of existing in this conditional love realm,
yeah, yeah,
it can really it kind of leaves you in a lot of pain when
hmm
you move on from that, and then when you start seeing these bits of like this like unconditional love and this response is the most rewarding, the most wonderful feeling that you get from it. And obviously you just want to keep going. And I feel like that's the thing is just like I said, like when I set my heart and my mind to like doing this project, and that's why I myself now I've come to believe in it so much, and like and think it's like it's sort of like my purpose, because I just see how the outside world kind of, just responds and like facilitates me like just going further, and not it's just like it's not letting me like stop. Like,
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah, so yeah.
It's really cool. And so we went over two of the songs. We went over High on Life and also Doing It Without You. What about It's a Thing? Where did It's a Thing originate from?
It's a thing was I so basically I quit my bartending job at the Sunset Marquee, and I went to England and to see Liam Gallagher play Nebworth, and then also just
Yeah.
hang out in London. Like I had some meetings set up there. And then I went to south of France to visit my friend. And while I was traveling, I was staying in touch with this person and realizing that like we had this strong connections, even though like I was, in even in like in my travels, like I still think about them, and we keep in touch, and it's like this positive good energy thing. Like again, I was rediscovering, and I actually, for like in a certain way, discovering for the first time what it feels like when you just have that natural connection. It's not
Mhm.
forced. It's just this beautiful thing that just is there. It's a thing. And I was like, when I was a bookworm back in Russia, I, I read a lot of like, French authors and like existentialists and stuff like that. And like Somerset Maugham, they all at a certain point had a residence in the south of France. And my dream when I was little was to one day write, in the south of France. So it was a beautiful thing because I flew from London to um, Nice, and a friend of mine who's also a musician, he gave me a guitar, and I went on the beach. It's like really beautiful, Côte d'Azur, like this French Riviera, and I sat down, and that's when It's a Thing came out. And I was like, that's kind of like it's that just like that dream is crossed now off my list.
Yeah, it checks off.
Yeah,
It's like an exclamation point on the occasion. It's like
yeah, that's a
one
good way
thing
to
you
put
can
it.
cross off the bucket list.
Yeah, exactly. So that was amazing. Actually, then, yeah.
Yeah, and then I Want to Be Your Clone has that similar theme where it's a good friend of yours kind of getting you back up to speed, like letting you know, like
That's yeah,
you are human. You do have merit in this world. Like
yeah,
get back out there. Like
yeah.
stop wallowing.
This was like little, yeah, like the little nuggets of that. Like I was like, because when you're like in this, like in this like whatever situation you're in, you're kind of like you dissociate and you're blind to a lot of things, and then you see one thing, and then like, and that was one of those things where like my college friend from that I knew for many years came to visit me, and she just started reminding me. She's like, remember you were so good at this, and you were so that, like, what are you doing, and I was just like, oh man,
Yeah,
like she's
oh God. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And so
Yeah.
I want to be your clone is like it's that like matching that energy again, and just like and being inspired by each other. And sometimes you do get lost, and I actually am writing a song right now at this moment that is one of the new ones about soulmates. And I believe that when you have those soulmates, those people, and sometimes when you get lost, they kind of reflect back at you who you truly are, like good parts of yourself. And that's like that's what it is. It's like if you have those, it's to me it's like so important to have those kind of like a constants, that like
Mhm.
can come back to you and say, hey, like, what are you doing? And you're like, oh, that's right. And it's not like an intrusive way. It's just like they're basically holding up a mirror to
Yeah,
who you
it's
are.
yeah, and
Yeah,
it's unconditional love too. I mean,
yeah,
it's not like they're not there so you can take a couple huffs and puffs and like, oh, you're my drug. It's like
yeah, yeah,
you're there to for you to like, you know, at least acknowledge and understand and respect why they're in your life. So it's good for you to have those. Like I would call them forever friends because like
Yes, absolutely. They
even
are.
like regardless what happens to them, they'll always occupy some space in us
Yeah.
at some point.
And yeah, and then those, like you're saying, forever friends, it's like maybe you're not gonna see them for a couple of years, and when you see them, it's like no time has passed. And then you're like, it's the same groove. It's a beautiful thing, honestly.
So it's like so your um solo album Alchemy, it's going to represent all these types of things like
Hmm.
self self-assurance, self-respect first and foremost, but at the same time not leaving out, not ruling out the importance of just having good solid people in your life, right?
100%. I that's just like that's something that I guess I consider myself very lucky and blessed to have this type of people in my life, and yeah, it's just one of the most beautiful thing you can have, like that genuine connection with someone,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
And bringing that sound, those ideas to the forefront, part of it alongside you was Ben Rice, like you
Yes.
mentioned. And um, how did you get your rapport going for this album, Alchemy? What kinds of ideas were you throwing at each other to get these songs sounding the way they do?
Yeah, so basically, when I like in the very early, like in the process, when I like gave Ben an initial phone call, this is
Mm-hmm.
gonna be interesting. I told him because we bonded on our love for Oasis, even like back then when we were
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
some stuff with Scarlet Cells, and I told him what I was thinking of, that the song that I wrote, just and he was in Spain at the moment with the
Mm-hmm.
guy who produced Bittersweet Symphony with the Verve. And
Oh,
the Verve
shit.
was part of like the thing. And then the
Yeah, no.
craziest thing about it all. And right now my mind is like skipping the it's so he was in that town. I don't know if you're familiar with that book, The Alchemist by Paul
Yeah,
Coelho.
yeah, yeah.
So he was in that town where the
Oh
book
man.
starts. So and there were like again like along with like this genuine connections blossoming, you know, with in with this path that I'm taking, there were all these synchronicities and little nuggets of like it's like gold, whatever I don't know what it is. And I was like, I cannot believe this. And he's like, yeah, I'm here. He's like, I'm like 100% in. Let's do it. So when we, got in, and basically, I flew from Los Angeles to New York. Kevin Jones, my bassist, came on the project. Ben brought his drummer. We got in a studio, and we played High on Life a couple of times, and we're like all looking at each other like, this is working, okay. And so it was kind of like also like a kind of like the alchemy of that moment of like I don't know, it's like we didn't even have to try. We've never played together like as a band, but it was just there. So when we recorded High on Life, and two more songs that are on the record but they're not out yet. One of them is my absolute favorite. It's called I Only Dream When I'm Awake. And that was also like a very beautiful moment, kind of also synchronicity, serendipity, all that stuff. And we like recorded those three songs in 2.5 days, and we sat down and we're like listening to them and like trying to finish like last things or whatever, because we just had the limited amount of time, and we're just like looking at each other. And my best friend was there too, Sasha. We're like, this is like like this slaps. This is really
Oh man,
something
you're
else,
using like current terms now. Jeez.
I mean, we're in 2024 almost, but yeah, we're like, man, like, what is this? Like, this is crazy. It kind of blew our minds in a way. So then basically it was just this thing where I was coming back to New York to record more and more, and Ben and I would talk in between, the sessions, and just our love for Britpop and New York punk rock as well, and a lot of like classic rock stuff, and we just would like throw this references around. For instance, I think when we were um, recording "Doing It Without You," it was Lenny Kravitz, Arctic Monkeys, Joan Jett. Like it was like this, like that type of world. Yeah. So and every song was slightly different because and when you speak the same language with your producer, it's so amazing. And Ben and I are kind of like that. We love rock and roll music, and so and it's kind of uncanny because he mentioned it a few times too. He's like, it's crazy how much our references are similar, to the stuff. So it made it very easy. Like I think it's part of the magic. It's just because we have very similar taste to music and artistic sensibilities, and he just like can, he just like completes the piece of, you know, the puzzle of me as like a writer, and a performer, like music musician, and he is a producer and also a musician, and also like we have this thing happening. I think it's very magical.
That's awesome. And Fangirl Records, that new label, that's exciting because I remember, and you remember too, to
Mm-hmm.
an equal extent back in the 90s, it was all about like Riot Girl and all
Yeah.
all those types of bands, all like Bikini Kill, and
Mm-hmm.
like that's what it kind of reminds me of. And I'm so excited to like hear that
Yeah.
female fronted spirit again because it's such a unique energy that we need more of. Like it's
100%.
it's like we've seen they can do pop, they can do R&B, but like to see like more rocking girls, that's awesome.
Yeah, and honestly, like I love the whole mission. So Fangirl Records, they just opened up their cafe as well in West
Oh,
Hollywood,
awesome.
and it's so amazing. The space, they're just so like they're heart-centered people, and you can see it. Like like they built the whole thing from scratch, and the whole place is just like beautiful. They kind of have like music videos playing all day of different female artists, and they
Yeah.
have all this, like one bathroom is like it's like all female, also like lead singers and musicians on the ceiling, and it's just a very beautiful space, and I think it's going to become a hub for this new wave coming in, and like eventually, hopefully, in the same building, we can do the record label and all that stuff. So yeah, it's a whole
Yeah,
thing.
we need like all of that spirit that everything can be expressed that they already bring to the table in like a rock way, in like a hard rock way too.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like it's so I'm excited. Like hopefully, once we get this interview down, like you can also, if you have like others who go the way of that label, like I'd also be like willing to interview them too,
for sure.
once the label gets going.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, for sure. And we were talking about it because they're right now focusing on like opening of the cafe because that's a lot of energy, a lot of time. So now that they're open and they're gonna stabilize that part of their venture. And now next year they'll be able to focus on the Fangirl records more. And once that, we release the record and all that stuff, and I'm gonna help curate, the artist roster and all that stuff. So we'll definitely be in touch.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
I think to sort of similarly wrap the interview how I did the interview that you did in the past, considering your career at this point in time, what have you learned about yourself, not only as a musician, but as a person?
What have I learned about myself? I learned that I am powerful, and I got rid of the limited belief. I think that I couldn't do it on my own, because we know all of that stuff, being, a
Yeah.
female in this business and all the other things, and and being in relationships and things like that. It sometimes gets confusing, and but I think we're entering this new era, and I feel it strongly too, that we're like, everyone's just kind of more aligned with themselves,
Hmm.
you know, male, female, or
Yeah, anybody.
whatever. Yeah, anybody. And we just like, I think we're become like, I see this shift. I see a lot of crazy things going on in the world, but I think it's part of the shift in this new direction of like being more heart centered and actually doing things for the love of it, and kind of being this like bright lights that you can shine at each other. And it's just like beautiful energy keeps on building. And so instead of just going for something because you want to achieve it or get it or whatever, it's just becoming more kind of just like,
In other words,
kind of,
it's more community centered. It's not, it's a lot
yeah,
less of the individual, like I'm doing this. Like, no, we're doing this.
yeah. But it's like exactly, it's becomes more community centered when you really like start loving yourself. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
when you love yourself.
Man, that energy gets put out
Yeah,
into the world.
exactly. So yeah, so I think I just fell in love with myself. That's what changed. And then now I just want to do cool things with more people and just give everyone that love, and just like be happy and be present.
Very well said. And lastly, anything you'd like to say to your fans?
Yes. I am so thrilled and so just grateful for all the people that, like you, Jake, have been with me on this
Oh,
journey since like what is this, like 7 years? It's gonna be almost 8 years, like 7.5 years
yeah.
ago. Yeah, we did that interview. Like it's so amazing. Like thank you so much for having me, on Music Existence again. Like it means a lot, like honestly. And also you're so insightful, and you're so, you observe all this stuff and you put it so beautifully in your questions. Like I really appreciate that. That's very cool. And so yeah, so I'm just thank you so much for following me along this journey. I am really, really grateful and so happy to have you here. And I just can't wait to do more cool stuff, and just play fun shows and connect with people and just inspire others to do what they love, and just fall in love with themselves as well if they're not there already. But if they are, let's just do more of that. Let's just create from that love. That's all.
Thank you so much for your kind words and for
Of
coming
course.
on. I really appreciate
Of course. Thank you for having me.
it.
Mhm.